Welcome to the Aviation Report, a show built around conversations with the people shaping how aviation actually works, from policy and governance to technology and day-to-day operations. I'm Alain Tremblay. I've spent my career working across multiple complex software systems, often behind the scenes, helping organizations navigate modernization, complexity, and change. Today's conversation comes at a moment when the aviation system is under real pressure to evolve. Passenger demand is growing, infrastructure is aging, and the national airspace system is being asked to do more, safely, efficiently, and intelligently than ever before. A lot of that work happens outside public view through leadership, data, and the organizations helping guide long-term decisions. Our guest today is Dawn Amore, President and CEO of Volano. Dawn was recently appointed to the board of directors of the Air Traffic Control Association, an organization that plays a central role in advancing air traffic management in the United States. Through her work, she's been deeply involved in how data, digital systems, and institutional leadership support the FAA and the broader aviation ecosystem. In this conversation, we talk about Dawn's path to the ATCA board, how technology is influencing air traffic management, and what effective leadership looks like at a time when aviation is being asked to adapt quickly without compromising safety and reliability. Let's get into it. Hi, Dawn. How are you doing today?
I am doing amazing. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so let's jump into some questions. So, Dawn, before we dive into BNACS, tell our listeners a bit about your journey. How did you end up leading a company in the intersection of technology and air traffic control?
Oh, well, that's a great question. And let me first say I'm really happy to be here and to be a part of this podcast. And this is, one of the moments where aviation history is being written in real time. So you asked about my journey into aviation, and it actually started in rail. I was actually involved with infrastructure and transportation more broadly, and my business partner and I founded Volano in 2003. I was working on large-scale IT programs, including modernizing Amtrak's digital platforms. My business partner had the aviation experience, and we decided that transportation, we could bring our rail and aviation experience together with a mission of moving people safely, reliably, and at a national scale. And so we decided that we would create a company that we wanted to work for. So we left our respective employers, and we wanted to have a place where we could work on interesting projects, innovative solutions, and find ways to make things more efficient and more productive for the staff at our agencies and also their customers. So we've spent the past 20 years supporting FAA and other transportation agencies across the nation. I'm now proud to serve on the board of directors for the Air Traffic Control Association, that's ATCA for short, where we're working on advocacy, education, and events to focus on the long-term health of the national airspace system, known as the NAS. And at Volano, we've had a major accomplishment where we recently introduced a new enterprise-level software platform for air traffic controllers for the record-keeping of their on-the-job training and briefing items. It was rolled out to over 18,000 controllers and managers at 313 facilities nationwide, plus the command center. And it's been a real success story. It's a testament to what small business can do.
So let's jump into the current state of the air traffic control infrastructure. When we talk about air traffic control infrastructure, what are we actually talking about? What does the system look like today?
Sure. So air traffic control is like a relay race being run 24/7, 365 at 500 miles an hour in bad weather with no pause button. Right. So we can start from the airport, right? The control tower is the thing that everybody recognizes. It's literally what you see when you look out the window. They're managing the airport, taxiing away from the gate, taking off, landing, those first few minutes in the air, those last minutes on the air. Once that plane leaves that area, it gets handed off to another facility called a TRACON, Terminal Radar Approach Control. And that's where the flights are climbing or descending. Then you're handed off again, this time to an air route traffic control center. And these are the long haul managers. These are called the centers. And they shepherd the flights across huge sections of the country. And they are the ones where the planes are at their cruising altitude and moving the fastest in their journey. So this system, it has these different types of facilities, and they handle a lot of traffic. The United States has the largest, most complex airspace system in the world. There's 16.5 million flights handled per year. It's about 45,000 per day. And at peak times, over 5,000 aircraft are in the sky simultaneously. We're the biggest and we're the safest. Aviation is a huge part of our economy. Aviation contributed 5.2% of the U.S. gross domestic product, and it's still growing. New entrants like electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, space operations, drones. These are another part of what is growing in the system, and it's also a growing part of our economy. So aviation is still very much in a growth period. You asked about the infrastructure. So what is the infrastructure to support that? It is a vast interconnected ecosystem, 600 radars, telecom networks, nearly 500 voice switches, surface sensors. There are new systems that are going to be deployed at 200 airport facilities, new automation software, physical facilities where the controllers work. So it encompasses a lot of things in the air traffic infrastructure.
The FAA has said that flight delay minutes due to equipment issues in 2025 are about 300% higher than the average from 2010 to 2024. What's driving that increase?
I mean, that's an incredible statistic, right? So let me give you some background. There's a lot of infrastructure that is actually dated back decades. In many cases, the FAA is still relying on copper networks and bespoke hardware that's incredibly hard to maintain. The spike in equipment-related delays, that is a signal that the systems are reaching their end of life, many of them simultaneously. And the average U.S. air traffic control tower is around 30 to 40 years old, with many towers being beyond their 25 to 30 designed lifespan. So it's leading to an urgency about modernizations due to aging infrastructure, leaks, outdated technology, with some facilities being 50 or 60 years old. So this is creating safety and operational issues, right? So the challenge is that these air traffic control systems don't fail in isolation. One weak link can cascade across facilities, airspaces, and regions. So when you're talking about these delays, it's really a matter of the fact that we need to modernize our skies to bring greater efficiency.
That is great answer and a great segue into our historical context. This isn't the first time the FAA are talking about modernization. We've heard about next gen for years. Why has the ATC modernization been so challenging historically?
Yeah, you're right. There was a program that was called Next Gen, and that was meant to bring about a lot of the modernization goals that are now being put forth by FAA today. The Next Gen program, it was reviewed by the U.S. Department of Transportation Inspector General. There was a report that was released in September of 2025. And that report, gave a lot of information on what it viewed as some of the failures. So NextGen largely failed for compound reasons, but some of the main ones were unrealistic goals, changing requirements, fragmented responsibility, poor oversight, and the simple complexity of doing this legacy system integration. And it's unfortunately delivered far fewer benefits than promised.
Yes, that is a great answer for that. We're moving now to the brand new air traffic controller system. Can you tell us a little bit about what is that BNATCS?
BNAX. BNAX is probably the best way to phrase that, right? So it is a full replacement of FAA's core air traffic control infrastructure. Not upgrades, replacement. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy has made it clear that the United States needs to be a leader in aviation. And to accomplish that, we need a brand new air traffic control system, emphasizing the brand new part. So, through this replacement, FAA states that it will enhance safety in the sky, reduce delays, and unlock the future of air travel. And that's very exciting to me, right? We're talking about new facilities, including air traffic control towers and those en route facilities I mentioned, radar systems, telecommunications, software platforms, hardware, and covering the continental United States and Alaska. So we're talking roughly 74,000 pieces of equipment. And the initial $12.5 billion investment, you've heard Secretary Duffy say it's just a down payment. The projection is that this modernization may cover $31 billion. Now, when you compare that to Meta, who recently said that they're investing $300 billion in artificial intelligence, in a lot of ways, I feel like this is a sound investment.
Definitely. The goal here, operational, is they're saying by end of 2028. That timeline is quite aggressive. Is that realistic? And what would need to happen for them to hit that target?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to lie, right? That goal is ambitious and it is aggressive. Operational by the end of 2028, with this contract just being awarded to the prime integrator. But listening to the FAA, they discussed the scope of the program and what they wanted to do in 2 industry days that were held in June 2025. FAA discussed that some of the research and development and testing in some areas were already quite mature. And I'll give you an example. There's a surface surveillance radar. FAA conducted a challenge-based acquisition to identify off-the-shelf technologies and vendors that met their requirements for surface radar. And surface radar is what detects the aircraft on the ground. In 9 months, FAA was able to go through that entire procurement process and get a first installation completed. So in some cases like this one, FAA simply needs the funds to accelerate a verified solution. And also, FAA Administrator Brian Bedford, he said that FAA is compressing the radar and telecom modernization also into this 3-year timeline. It's already transitioned some of its copper communications infrastructure to fiber, right? So Bedford is going to commit $6 billion by the end of 2025 on air traffic control telecom infrastructure and radar surveillance systems. So, another issue, it sounds really basic, but it's building permits. To lay new fiber for communications or build new towers, you need permits. And some of those, FAA was reporting, could get held up. Getting access to Native American land, military bases, those could be real barriers. And these processes could be accelerated due to the urgency of this modernization and, frankly, the support of the administration. So you have these pieces of money, logistics, and it's becoming possible because FAA has changed how it procures and governs this modernization. They're expediting their procurement processes. They've crafted an innovative request for solutions with the concept of a prime integrator. And it's the biggest procurement of a generation designed to ensure performance. In fact, the cover of the request for solution document literally says in all caps, brand new air traffic control system, no excuses, exceptional delivery.
I heard you say prime integrator in that answer. I think that's a new approach for the FAA. Can you explain what that means and why it's significant?
Sure. And it's interesting because as part of my role on the ATCA board of directors, just before those industry days I mentioned, we had been up on the Hill talking about the need to, set up some standards for reducing the average age of some of the ATM infrastructure to below its service life, right? We shouldn't have towers that are, 60 years old. That we needed to break the cycle that uses investment funds for sustainment rather than to use them for modernization, because FAA is subject to these funding bills and shutdowns. They don't have the consistent and reliable funding that they need. We talked about promoting the adoption of commercial off-the-shelf technology. FAA has often done things that were bespoke. We also talked about removing a lot of the procedural barriers and also to find a way to use a primary private integrator, a single private company to serve in that role. Now, FAA's Industry Days, which happened a few days later in June of 2025, mirrored these concepts. They wanted a framework that was going to get the job done. They wanted to make sure that they didn't lose capabilities. They wanted safety as a primary thing for them to be able to address. They wanted to prevent vendor lock. So BMAX flips that model. The integrator, this prime integrator, is responsible for coordination, interfaces, schedules, and outcomes. It's making sure that all the handoffs, all the work, that the modernization happens while we continue to operate 24/7, and that risk is actively managed rather than distributed. Procedural structural change is significant, right? So FAA was accepting requests for solutions. The vendors would say, how would you set up this program? With the suggestion of a prime integrator as an approach. And that's in fact what they did in the end. So FAA on December 4th, 2025, they selected Peraton as the single prime integrator with end-to-end accountability. If you look at the things that they've accomplished, they are a systems integrator, right? They have deep, repeatable performance, particularly at NASA and other high-profile federal missions where they need to make sure that a system is available, operational, and it can function under all of the operational pressure during the modernization. So that type of work, to me, is directly analogous to what the goals are of the BNATs, right? All of these systems need to operate as one system during this modernization.
Your company, Volano, works closely with air traffic controller training. How are the controllers themselves viewing this modernization?
Well, the controllers want reliable tools, period. And the modernization is going to affect a lot of things, their training, their procedures, their workload. There is the union, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, or NATCA. Their involvement is going to be critical, right? There's going to be transition and there'll be challenges, but if done right, the modernization should reduce cognitive load and improve reliability. So, from Volano's perspective, training on these systems will need to evolve in parallel. We can't modernize without making sure everybody knows how this system is going to work and how these tools compare. From our experience with air traffic control community, a new tool, it does take time. But if the capabilities help them, if they get better decision support tools, faster ways to analyze scenarios, I believe that this system adoption will be much smoother.
What's at stake if we don't get this right?
I think we saw a glimpse of that during the recent government shutdown. The air carriers, they needed to reposition their crews, reposition their aircraft because they had cancellations. If you cancel the flight from JFK to Los Angeles and that aircraft isn't there anymore, it has a downstream effect, right? So we would probably see more cancellations, fewer flights, fewer people taking trips, and probably an impact to our economy. And I think that if we don't get it right and we don't have the information that we need, we have the stakes are enormous from a safety perspective, our global competitiveness, and also from controller morale. This is a very skilled workforce that is dealing with high pressure all of the time. They're already under a lot of strain from the fact that there aren't enough air traffic controllers to cover the traffic needed today. And, to me, I know that they want this to be successful.
Let's talk a little bit about the FAA's multiple hats. So the FAA is unique among federal agencies. It's a regulator. They're also an operator and now a massive infrastructure owner undergoing transformation. How does the FAA balance all these roles?
Yeah, I mean, it's a balancing act, right? The regulator, they're setting the safety rules. They certify aircraft. They oversee compliance with inspections, right? As an operator, they're running the air traffic control system every day, 24/7, right? And now they're going to be the stewards of one of the largest infrastructure modernization efforts in the federal government, probably in our generation, right? So this is a massive program. And I actually think that those roles, there's a lot of things that people don't know that they do behind the scenes, right? FAA has technicians that repair radar systems. FAA has its own safety, aircraft safety investigation branch for any kind of crashes, in addition to the NTSB. They have a grant program to help airports make infrastructure improvements. They train air traffic controllers. So balancing all those roles is difficult, right? Some countries, like Canada, they'll separate operations from regulation. But I do think that FAA is ready to be able to modernize at scale while preserving these other roles.
Yeah, you talked about other countries, and some of those countries, like Canada, have separated the air traffic control operations from a regulatory function. Do you see a model ever coming to the US?
The privatization of the FAA has been something that has long been talked about. I don't think that there has been the political will to do that. I believe the creation of this prime integrator is probably as close as they'll get to that, at least for the next few years. There have been arguments for and against this, but I do think that if BNets is successful, that FAA can continue to be in this role.
For some of our listeners who work at airports, help us understand where the FAA's responsibility ends and the airport authority begins.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of people think that FAA has everything to do with every part of your trip, but there's actually multiple players involved. The airports typically are run by an airport authority, and they're the ones who are responsible for the facilities, the operations, the escalators, the baggage claims, even making the decisions about, whether you've got Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks for getting your concessions. Security is run by TSA. Even the gates are actually usually worked out between the airlines and the airport authority. So the minute the FAA says it's okay for you to push back from the gate is kind of when their part of the control begins. So they're responsible for assigning the runway, the takeoff, and then handling and controlling the flight throughout its journey. The airport authority definitely is just there for that airport experience.
Dawn, I'd love to change a little bit and really talk about your journey. Volano is a certified woman-owned small business that has been built and, substantial practice with the FAA over the last 20 years. And that's extremely remarkable for sure. And kudos to you for building this. How did you break in?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the ways, and this is really more general tip to all the small businesses out there, is to, talk to people and go to conferences where you may be able to meet some of the decision makers. In our case, we actually wound up having a very solid data experience where we were actually able to work with some of the very tricky surveillance data from the FAA and be able to develop aviation metrics. Because FAA needed basic information. How many delays were there? How many cancellations? How many diversions? And we had an innovative approach to that. We didn't have a contract with them directly. We started out as a subcontractor. So from there, we had to work through that prime contractor to get more work and to demonstrate that we could do it. But you also have to show that you've got something that they want and that you can deliver. So that was a big part of our journey. What we also found is that because we were working for aviation, we would tell our rail customers about the work we were doing. And there was a transferability between projects we were doing for one customer to another. So building those partnerships, looking at the contract vehicles that are available too, staying up on all of that, doing your research. FAA actually has an excellent small business office that could give you information about contracting opportunities. They have a forecast that they publish on the U.S. Department of Transportation website. There are specific small business vehicles or small business tracks. One of those is EFAST, which is FAA's electronic system for small business. Also, there is a USDOT Small Business Innovation Research Program. We've actually applied and won a grant through that program where you can say, I have this innovative idea, and they'll give you limited funding. And what is really cool about that is that if it has commercial viability, you get to keep all of the intellectual property that's been developed under that program.
What's been the biggest challenge in growing a small business in the federal aviation space?
Yeah. Well, I have to say one thing that is true about working on government contracts is that there is a longer sales cycle. You have to be prepared for that and be patient. You do need to make sure that you get registered with the System for Award Management. If you are a woman-owned small business or a small business, SBA has a program for you to go ahead and get registered and certified. And also be ready to talk about yourself. They talk about the elevator pitch. That is so important. It's really important to be able to explain to somebody what it is that you do or be clear about what makes you unique. So that persistence, if you say you're going to do something, do it. If you say you're going to follow up, do it. That all leads to credibility. And you have to be considerate of making sure you keep your quality up, especially if you're in a growth period.
Yeah, what would be the pathways like for our listeners today who want to get their company involved in aviation or in airports or even with airlines? What would be their pathways?
Yeah, sure. So at the federal level, I had mentioned that there was the FAA Small Business Office. I mean, I think those resources can help you. In fact, I noticed that they posting on LinkedIn that they're doing industry days. FAA is doing challenges. They're really not required to follow the same acquisition rules as the rest of the federal government. And right now, they are using all the flexibility they have to be able to do direct awards, to be able to produce challenges. So I think the field is very wide open. And also monitoring sam.gov, that is where FAA opportunities are typically posted. As for the state and local airports, there are industry associations too. There's AAAE, the American Association of Airport Executives, industry associations like the one I'm on the board of directors for, ATCA, Air Traffic Control Association. They've got events where FAA leaders typically attend. This coming spring, the event will be in Charleston, South Carolina, to try to start aligning with some of the military users of the airspace system as well. And then also the state and local airport authorities. I'm in Washington, D.C., so Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority actually conducts events that are Meet the Prime events. So look for those and be ready with your capability statement and elevator pitch.
Excellent. The program that your company is on, the Women-Owned Small Business, I think has specific set asides. So can you explain how that works and what it means for your business?
Yeah, so often the federal government will be setting up these programs. They call them like different socioeconomic statuses, right? So small business is one category, but then within small, you've got woman-owned small business. You have the 8A program, which is one where it's got a economic disadvantage plus other components to it. Hub zone is more geographically based. So the federal government will track how they're doing and how many procurements that they have put out in each of these programs, and they have goals. I believe currently it's 15% is the goal that they've set up for, doing these awards. And they're really there to try to help encourage more players to come in, right? Not just going to the same contractors. It was in 2021 that FAA actually updated its acquisition guidelines to include a direct award program for women-owned small businesses. So there's the ability to get a direct award up to $4.5 million. If you have something that the agency is interested in and you have a champion who can go through that process, that is one way that you can definitely get in the door. Doing your research and finding out what agencies may not have met their goals is one way that you can definitely be sure that you could try to get your foot in the door. And people also want to know you, and they want to be able to meet you and know who they're going to be working with. So don't underestimate that. trying to get in-person meetings or meet people at conferences can make a big difference. Also, SBA has changed its certification process, so there is an official small business certification process. Make sure you make time to do all of those things because you will need to make sure you have that box checked before you actually apply for an opportunity.
Tying back the small businesses to the BNACS opportunities we were talking at the beginning, we mentioned the BNACS program has about $31 billion flowing into the air traffic control modernization. Where do you see the opportunities for small businesses?
Yeah, so I think that the prime integrator is going to be responsible for orchestrating all types of programs and all types of vendors to be able to get the job done in the time frame. So they are looking for the best. They're looking for delivery. And I think at this point, because the program has just been awarded so frequently, it's unclear right now exactly how that will happen. But if I were to make my guess, I believe that there will be some industry days and other opportunities to engage with them. Peraton has got a very strong track record of engaging with businesses of all sizes. They have to meet this customer's expectation. They have to be able to deliver. So there's going to be a variety of things, and they're going to need to have a wide array of suppliers to be able to meet this timeline. There will be a lot of activity that will come from even reporting on what's going on with the program. The government's going to want to see progress and they need objective measures of that. So it might even be some of the program management tracking. There's going to be a lot of integration work, testing and quality assistance. So I fully expect that we will see opportunities coming out as they find the best of the best to support this program.
Beyond the FAA, what other opportunities exist at airports for small businesses?
Well, a lot of the small businesses have disadvantaged business enterprise goals. They have their own procurement processes. Many of them will actually issue a forecast. They will say that these are the procurements that we have coming up. Sometimes it'll be 6 months to a year in advance. So getting on their websites, a lot of them are actually very actively looking for vendors. And if you can get notifications, you can go to those Meet the Prime industry days, you can get on their mailing lists and also follow the forecast. They're usually very open to talking to people too, and many of them go to the AAAE events if you wanted to try to get to more than one airport at a time. One of the things that has been an issue for the airports is that they have been concerned about drones entering into that secured airspace. So there's a whole cottage industry of anti-drone technology to be able to capture those drones. I mean, there was even a technology I saw that would throw a net over a drone to safely bring it back to a location that doesn't interfere with aircraft operations. They also are looking for security solutions. Construction is huge. They may be upgrading some of their instrument landing systems. Airports also need consulting activities. They're always looking for ways that they can improve their efficiency. Everything from baggage handling to escalator operations, they really want to make sure that things are operating optimally.
I really heard your passion for aviation in there in that answer. It was great. Looking ahead on the future of aviation technology, what technology trends are you the most excited about that's probably coming in aviation?
It's interesting times, but I think that one of the things that I think is going to be really great is the introduction of AI ML in air traffic management. Now, I know that's a touchy subject. Today I would not want an AI controlling my aircraft, but I just read an article about how IBM in Riyadh was like doing an AI native implementation of air traffic control. So it's very interesting times. I think that it could be used for decision support. I think that there is an opportunity to be able to do more complex simulations of how aircraft could go through the system, the impact of a weather pattern, right? Aircraft typically will go around bad weather. You have to route around that. But is there a better way to do that? How do we model that? Is there a way that we can pick a route that's going to work better? So I see a lot of opportunity for that decision support and modeling to be able to handle operational problems in the moment. I see that as being support, not replacing human decisions, but giving humans a faster way to evaluate what options that they have. I think also data analytics, which is an area that I am so excited about. I think if we have better and more reliable equipment, we're going to be able to see so much of what's happening operationally and be able to plan for those new entrants. A lot of people don't realize with space operations, like if there's a launch off of Cape Canaveral, the air traffic control system actually needs to model who is going through that airspace at that time so they can clear it. So there's a lot of orchestration there that needs to be done from a safety perspective. One of the things I've actually seen, and I think it's an outstanding use case, is the development of a digital twin for planning for a new air traffic control tower. You can actually simulate where it's going to be located, what the sight lines are going to be, and you can simulate where the sun is going to be projected. So these are all ways that we can accelerate designs, test things out, and not run into those problems. So I'm very excited about some of the trends that are coming up.
And what would be the roles of companies like Volano, and how will they play this in the future?
Well, in our case, one of the things that I see us bringing is that we have been supporting a number of reports that go to FAA executives and are used in official reporting by the agency. There's a document called Air Traffic by the Numbers, which cites a lot of the things from the system we maintain. I think one of the things it's tactical, it sounds small, but I think is super important is that as this data that we're getting from the systems are actually equal or better, right? Understanding any difference in deviations in that reporting would be a good, solid way to know, is the system operating correctly, right? We can get all of that. We can analyze that. So that's one area. I feel as though our success in bringing new technology to air traffic controllers is another area that we can support. We used an agile methodology practice to be able to work with those stakeholders and show them every 2 weeks, demo to them, here's what we have. So I know that there has been an emphasis on using tools to develop UIs, user interfaces. I think we'll be able to bridge those modern and legacy systems and support that cutover and doing some organizational change management. So those are the areas that I think that we could play. And also our radio communications experience, they're talking about replacing thousands of radios. And so for the work that we've done to support Metro, we're also in a very good place to be able to support that new radio transition.
Excellent. In closing today, our conversation, Dawn, for someone just starting to explore opportunities in aviation, what's your one piece of advice?
Understand the mission. Learn it deeply. Aviation is demanding, and you need to make sure that you understand how it is that you're going to be able to support that mission clearly and concisely. And I would be happy to have your listeners connect with me on LinkedIn and see us at ATCA events, but definitely know and understand that mission.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. And I think a lot of people are going to appreciate that. Where can listeners connect with you?
Volano.com is our website. I also am on LinkedIn if you want to connect with me there. Also, I mentioned some of the upcoming ATCA events are ones where you can meet FAA personnel and some of the leaders. And so I'll be more than happy to connect, and you can learn about some of the great things that we've done.
Dawn Amore, thank you so much for joining us on the Aviation Report podcast. Was an incredible conversation about a transformational moment in aviation history. Always a pleasure to talk with you, and definitely looking forward to meeting you again in DC.
Thank you, Alana. It was my pleasure to be a part of this podcast and to share my love and enthusiasm for what is going to be a transformational time in aviation.
For our listeners, if you're interested in learning more about BNACs, check out the FAA's fact sheet at faa.gov. And if you're a small business looking to get involved in aviation, the FAA Small Business Office at sbo.faa.gov is a great starting point. I'm Alain Tremblay. Thanks for listening to the Aviation Report podcast. Until next time, safe travels.
Thank you for listening to the Aviation Report podcast. I'm executive producer Julie Gates. The podcast is being brought to you by Modaxo, passionate about moving the world's people. Our team includes producer Chris O'Keefe, editor Patrick Emile, associate producer Cindy Raskin, executive producer Trisha Murray, and our host, Jennifer Shaw. To follow the show, visit theaviation.report or find us on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.